I buried my secret underground for 20 years. For 20 years I walked, I talked, I laughed like a normal man. I went to work, I came home, I kissed my wife goodnight. I watched my daughter grow up, but under my feet, 6 feet deep, my biggest secret was rotting away. Nobody knew, not my wife, not my daughter, not my closest friend. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it would disappear. I thought time would cover it, just like the soil did. I was wrong. Some things don't stay buried. They wait, they grow roots, and one day they come back up to the surface, and they take everything with them. My name is Daniel Cross, and this is the story of how I buried a man, and buried myself along with him. I wasn't born a criminal. I want you to understand that first. I grew up in a small town. My father worked in a factory. My mother stayed home and raised 3 of us. We didn't have much money, but we had food on the table and love in the house. That's more than a lot of people get. I was a simple boy. Good in school, but not the best. I liked working with my hands, fixing things, building things. By the time I was 18, I knew I didn't want to work for someone else my whole life. I wanted to build something of my own. That's when I met Tom. Tom Reyes was my best friend since high school. We were like brothers. He was loud, funny, always had a plan. I was quiet, careful, always double-checking everything. People used to say we were opposite in every way, but somehow, that's what made our friendship work. When we turned 25, we decided to start a business together, a small hardware and tool store. We took a loan from the bank. We put in our own savings. We worked day and night to build it from nothing. For the first 2 years, it was good, really good. We were proud. We had something that was ours. But money changes people, and it changed us too. The business started struggling in the 3rd year. New competitors opened nearby. Customers slowly stopped coming. The loan payments were due every month, and the store wasn't making enough. I started staying late, going through the accounts, trying to figure out where we were losing money. And that's when I noticed something strange. Small amounts were missing, not huge sums, just enough that you wouldn't notice unless you were really looking. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe I miscounted, but it kept happening month after month. I checked the records more carefully, and I found out. It was Tom, my best friend, my brother. He was taking money from our own business behind my back for almost a year. I confronted him one evening after we closed the shop. I asked him straight, "Tom, is this you?" He didn't deny it. He just looked at me and said, "I needed it. I have debts you don't know about. I was going to pay it back." I felt something break inside me. Not just anger, betrayal. The kind that goes deep because it comes from someone you trusted with your whole life. We argued, loudly. Things we never said to each other before came out that night. He said I always controlled everything. I said he was a thief hiding behind a friendship. It got worse every day after that. We weren't partners anymore. We were enemies sharing a shop. One night, about 2 weeks later, Tom came to my house. It was late, almost midnight. My wife, Ruth, was already asleep. He was drunk, angry, saying things about closing the store, about taking his share and leaving me with all the debt. I told him to leave. He wouldn't. He pushed me. I pushed him back. I don't remember every second of what happened next. It happened so fast. We were shouting, grabbing at each other, and he fell backward, hit his head on the edge of the concrete step outside my house. He stopped moving. I called his name. I shook him. Nothing. I sat there on the ground next to him for what felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. My hands were shaking. My mind was empty and loud at the same time, if that makes any sense. I knew I should call the police. I knew that's what a normal person, an innocent person, would do. But fear is a strange thing. It doesn't let you think straight. All I could think was, nobody will believe this was an accident. They'll see the arguments we had. They'll see the money he stole and think I killed him for revenge. I'll lose everything. My business, my wife, my future. So I made the worst decision of my life. I got my shovel from the shed. I drove Tom's body, wrapped in an old tarp, to a quiet field about 2 miles from my house, land I used to walk through as a kid, and in the darkness, under a sky with no moon, I dug a hole. I buried my best friend that night. I remember the sound of the dirt hitting the tarp. I remember my own breathing, loud in the silence. I remember standing there afterward, covered in mud and sweat, staring at the fresh earth, feeling like I had just buried a part of myself too. I told myself it was done. I told myself I could move on. I had no idea that I had just started digging my own grave, just a slower one. The next morning I reported Tom as missing. I told the police we had a business disagreement and he probably left town to avoid his debts. Some people believed it. Tom had money problems everyone knew about, so it wasn't hard to convince them. For a while, it worked. The search for him was small, quiet, and after a few months it went cold. Life moved on. I married Ruth 2 years later. She was kind, patient, and she loved me in a way I didn't think I deserved anymore. We had a daughter. We named her Lily. From the outside, I had everything. A respected man in town, a loving family, a business that slowly recovered once I was running it alone. But inside, I was a different person. I never went near that field again. I avoided that road completely, even if it meant driving 20 minutes longer to get somewhere. Every time it rained heavily, I would panic, thinking the water might wash away the soil and expose what was underneath. I had nightmares. Almost every week I dreamed of Tom standing at the edge of my bed, soaked in mud, just staring at me without saying a word. I would wake up sweating, and Ruth would ask what was wrong. I always said, just a bad dream, and she never asked more. There was one night, maybe 8 years after it happened, when I almost told her everything. We were sitting on the porch, and she asked me why I looked so sad lately. The words were right there, at the back of my throat. I opened my mouth to speak, and then I looked at Lily, playing in the yard, laughing, so innocent. And I closed my mouth. I said, I'm just tired from work. I buried the truth again, just like I buried Tom. 20 years is a long time, long enough to make you believe the past is truly gone. The town grew, new roads were built, new houses came up, and one day I heard that the field, that same field, was going to be cleared for a new housing project. My stomach dropped the moment I heard it. I told myself it would be fine. It had been so long. Nature had covered everything. Nobody would think to look there. But construction workers, while preparing the land, found something unusual in the soil, old fabric and then bones. They stopped work immediately and called the police. A detective named Officer Grant took over the case. He was thorough, patient, the kind of investigator who doesn't let go once he starts pulling a thread. Forensic teams identified the remains through dental records. It was Tom. The case that had gone cold for 20 years was suddenly the biggest news in town again. Grant started re-interviewing everyone who once knew Tom, old neighbors, old customers, and eventually me. At first, the questions were simple. When did you last see him? What was your relationship like? I answered calmly, the same story I had told 20 years ago. But then, something I didn't expect happened. An old neighbor, a woman who used to live across from my house, remembered seeing a truck, my truck, driving out late at night around the same time Tom disappeared. She hadn't thought it was important back then. But now, with a body found so close to my old route, it became a very important detail. Grant also found records showing Tom had made a call to a pawn shop the same week he vanished, mentioning he was coming to sell some tools that matched ones missing from our old shop inventory. Piece by piece, quietly, carefully, the evidence started forming a picture. And that picture pointed straight at me. I could feel it. The way Grant looked at me during our second interview was different from the first. Less casual, more focused. I went home that night and sat outside for hours, staring at the sky, feeling the same fear I felt 20 years ago. Except this time, I didn't have a shovel to fix it. 2 weeks later, in the early morning, I heard a knock at my door. I already knew. I opened it, and there was Officer Grant, along with 2 other officers. "Daniel Cross," he said, "you're under arrest for the murder of Tom Reyes." Time seemed to freeze in that moment. I heard Lily's voice from upstairs asking what was happening. I heard Ruth's footsteps rushing to the door. I saw her face when she saw the handcuffs going onto my wrists. Confusion first, then horror, then something I had never seen from her before. Fear of me. Neighbors stepped outside to watch. Some whispered. Some just stared in silence. I didn't resist. I didn't argue. Some part of me, honestly, felt relief. 20 years of carrying that weight, and finally someone else knew. At the police station during questioning, I denied everything at first. It's what fear does. It makes you cling to lies even when you know they're falling apart. But Grant was patient. He laid out the evidence slowly. The bones, the location tied to my old walking route, the witness, the financial records showing Tom's theft, which gave me a motive. He looked at me and said quietly, "You've carried this a long time, haven't you?" Something in me broke. I told him everything, the argument, the accident, the fear that made me bury him instead of calling for help. I confessed to it all, not because I had no choice, but because I was tired of living inside a lie that had slowly turned my whole life into a performance. The trial lasted almost 2 months. Sitting in that courtroom, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Every eye in that room was on me. Reporters, strangers, people from my town who used to greet me with a smile and now looked at me like a monster. Ruth came to a few sessions. She sat far in the back, never looking directly at me. Lily, who was 17 by then, came only once. She didn't speak to me. She just watched, tears rolling silently down her face before she left early. That image still lives in my mind every single day. My lawyer argued that Tom's death was an accident during a fight, not a planned murder. Manslaughter, not murder. The prosecution argued that hiding the body, lying to police, and living a normal life for 20 years proved intent and deep guilt. The evidence was strong. My own confession made it stronger. After weeks of arguments, evidence, and testimonies, the jury reached their decision: guilty. The judge considered the circumstances, the years of hiding, the deception, but also the lack of premeditated intent to kill. He sentenced me to 20 years in prison. 20 years, the exact number of years I had spent hiding what happened. It felt like fate was settling a debt I never fully understood I owed. The first year in prison was the hardest. I lost the little freedom I had left. I lost my business. Ruth filed for divorce 6 months after the trial. She said she couldn't live with a man she never truly knew. Lily stopped visiting after the 2nd year. She sent one letter, just one, telling me she needed time to understand who her father really was. I never got another letter after that. Prison teaches you things freedom never can. It teaches you how loud silence can be at night. It teaches you how heavy regret feels when you have nothing left to distract you from it. I spent hours thinking about Tom. Not just how he died, but who he was before that night. The boy who used to make me laugh in school. The friend who stood beside me when we opened our store, dreaming of a future together. I destroyed that future in one moment of anger and fear, and then I spent 20 years pretending it never happened. The years in prison passed slowly. I worked in the library. I read more books in that decade than I had in my entire life before. I aged. My hair turned gray. My hands, once strong from building things, grew weaker. I often say, burying Tom didn't protect me. It only delayed my punishment. The real prison wasn't these walls. It was the 20 years I spent outside, pretending to be free while carrying a body's weight in my chest every single day. People ask me sometimes, through letters, through the prison counselor, "Do you regret it?" I regret the night it happened. I regret losing my temper. But if I'm honest, my biggest regret isn't that night at all. It's every day after it. Every day I chose silence over truth. Every year I let my wife love a man who didn't exist. Every year I let my daughter believe her father was someone he wasn't. I thought I was protecting my life by burying that secret, but all I did was bury myself alive, one lie at a time, for 20 years. If you're watching this and you're carrying a secret of your own, something you buried, something you're scared to say out loud, I want you to hear this from someone who knows. A secret buried in soil still grows. It doesn't disappear. It just grows quietly in the dark until one day it breaks through the surface and takes everything with it. The truth always finds a way out. The only choice you really have is whether you dig it up yourself or wait for it to dig itself out of you. A God's voice is heard faintly outside. Cross, time's up. Daniel looks toward the cell door, then back at the camera one last time. I buried my secret for 20 years. It's finally free. And so, in a strange way, am I.